I was looking around videos related to sleep recently, and I realized that there's not really any videos talking about how to sleep better for college students. There's a lot of videos about sleep on the internet, but very little videos specifically for college students because our sleep schedules are a bit different than everyone else's. The normal person working a normal 9 to 5, they're able to sleep a lot better than us. We have these wacky sleep schedules. We're probably ingesting enough caffeine to kill a small wheel. It's a little bit different for us. And as someone who's been essentially professionally sleep deprived for the last couple of years, I just want to share with you guys a couple of the things I've implemented into just my sleep schedules to help me get better sleep. Now, my first point is that you should only be drinking coffee if you absolutely need it. You should never be drinking anticipatory coffee. So if you have a late night of studying and you know that at some point you're going to get tired and at some point it's going to get late, if it's 7 p.m. and you're not yet tired, you should not be drinking coffee until you're absolutely, disheveled, out of it, want to go to bed, exhausted. You should not just be drinking anticipatory coffee because then if the study session doesn't go as long as you think it will, say it's not as bad as you thought, you get to go back home earlier and try to go to bed. If you drink coffee too soon, then you're just going to be up for the rest of the night. Unless you absolutely know you're pulling an all-nighter or you need to stay up super late, don't drink coffee until you absolutely need it. Now, my second point is to never ever pull all-nighters. Even just getting 1 or 2 hours of sleep, that's always going to be better than an all-nighter. And I know it's college and we kind of have this culture of thinking that it's sort of cool to stay up late and that, we're all just chugging energy drinks and essentially just thugging it out, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. But honestly, if you can avoid all-nighters, I really want you to do so at all costs. We know that sleep is super important for memory consolidation, which is basically just your brain's ability to store information that you've learned recently. So if you're pulling an all-nighter and you're just studying all night and then you go right into a test afterwards, it's very hard for your brain to just store that information. If you study most of the night and then get just 1 or 2 hours of sleep even, trust me, you're going to remember a lot more information for whatever test or quiz or whatever else you have to go into right afterwards. And now one point I want to make is that most people are actually misinformed on how much sleep they're getting. If I were to tell you that you had to wake up at 8 in the morning and that you want at least 8 hours of sleep, what time would you go to bed? Now, most people would say 12 o'clock, but we have to draw a distinction between time spent in bed and time spent asleep. Unless you're someone who can just immediately fall asleep the second their head hits the pillow and stay asleep, the average person takes a little while to fall asleep and tosses and turns and wakes up a decent amount during the night without remembering it. So if we want you to get 8 hours of sleep, that should really equate to at least 9 hours in bed. So if you have to get up at 8 in the morning, then at the latest, you should really be in bed by 11, especially if you have a big test coming up, or say you're a student who gets a lot of physical activity in, maybe you're a student athlete, or you just go to the gym a lot. It's really important that you get that recovery, not just physically, but also mentally. Another tip, and this is sort of a worst case scenario tip, so I would not recommend doing this a lot, but I would say that melatonin can be very useful at times. One habit that I had, and this was not healthy, so I wouldn't recommend this to anyone, but again, worst case scenario. There was one summer class I took. I had to take summer chemistry a while ago, and I was taking it with summer calculus, so I essentially had no time at all to do anything because it was 2 4-month classes, both crammed into 1 month, and it was pretty horrible. So every Thursday night, I had to study chemistry because we had a chemistry exam every Friday. So Thursday night, I would basically be up until 3 in the morning, and I would just be pounding coffees because if not, I would probably have been asleep 5 hours earlier. So I'm pounding coffees until 3 in the morning. And then of course, since I've been drinking all this coffee, I can't fall asleep. So what I would do was I would take a couple melatonins and that would actually balance out the coffee, and then I could go right to bed. And like I said before, this scenario is not what I'm promoting. What I am saying is that melatonin can be useful at times. If you've accidentally had too much coffee during a night of studying and you absolutely can't fall asleep, melatonin can be super useful because you pop 2 of those, relax, lie in bed for a little bit, and usually it can help a little bit with the process of falling asleep. What you don't want to do is become reliant on this. You shouldn't be taking melatonin every night. This is only a worst case scenario when you have a really long study session and you can't fall asleep for whatever reason. And this really comes down to everyone's personal tolerances to melatonin because for some people, they could eat a bunch of it and it essentially won't do anything. But I think for some people, this could be useful. Again, not all the time, but as a worst case scenario, melatonin has its place. Now, one last tip I have that's a little bit less sleep related and a little bit more just me dogging on social media is the fact that when you're studying really late and maybe you even have to pull an all-nighter, you should never be on your phone while you're studying, because some people might say, oh, I had to study all night. But if you were studying for 4 hours and scrolling on stories for another 3 hours, then you didn't really have to pull that all-nighter. You were just wasting a lot more time than you should have. When you have to study real late, we should always be looking for these little pockets of time that we can save, because that's what's going to give us that possibility of 1 or 2 hours of sleep that we can get at the very end of our study session. Because if not, then we're just wasting all of our time and we're going to realize we have no time to sleep, which is something we absolutely do not want. So always be looking for little pockets of time that you can kind of pull out and use those to sleep. So you think to yourself, I could, instead of scrolling social media, I could take that 1 hour that I might have done that, finish studying an hour early, and then go to bed, get an hour of sleep, and be much more prepared for my test or whatever else I have the next day. Now, we've gone over 5 points in this video. I'm just going to quickly summarize what we've talked about. First, never drink anticipatory coffee. If you're not absolutely tired yet, don't drink any coffee because it may keep you up longer than intended. Second, never pull all-nighters unless you absolutely have to. Just 1 or 2 hours of sleep will help you remember information for your test so much better than not sleeping at all. Third, start accurately tracking how much sleep you're getting. Just because you sat in bed for 8 hours does not mean you got 8 hours of sleep. Fourth, melatonin can be a useful tool if you can't fall asleep after a long study session. It shouldn't be used all the time, but it should be used as a worst case scenario when you absolutely cannot fall asleep. And fifth, cut out social media during your late night study sessions. You can use those hours as more time to sleep. Now, I really hope some of these tips can be useful for you guys. I know personally, I wish I had someone tell me how to just get better sleep throughout my years of college, because I definitely have not had the best sleep schedule for several years, and I think these tips can really help. If you're still here, I really appreciate you watching to the end. If you like videos like this, you should subscribe because there's going to be a whole lot more soon. But until then, I'll see you guys.